189. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يسألونك عن الأهلة. They ask you about the new moons. قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج. Tell them it is a calendar for the people and for the calculation of time for Hajj. وَلَيْسَ الْبِرُّ بِأَن تَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ ظُهُورِهَا. It is not a virtue to enter the houses from the back. So when the time would come for Hajj, if there is something that the people living in the vicinity had forgotten, now they have this understanding that we've donned the ihram, we can't go back to our houses. So what they would then find a loophole for themselves is by saying, okay, we won't go from the front doors. We'll go from the back of the houses. Going from the front is completely prohibited. So again, you see an obsessive level of just dwelling upon this, oh, this is an absolute no. This is an absolute rigid no. You cannot go back, even if it is a dire necessity from the front of your house. What do? You go from the back, completely defeating the purpose of what the instruction or whatever the prohibition, whatever the requirements of ihram are there, they're being mocked by this level of rigidity. Now these are people who have no qualms about doing tawaf around the Kaaba naked. They have completely justified that for themselves. But when it comes to going back to their houses from the front door, that's an absolute prohibition. وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى. But virtue, righteousness, is the one who has taqwa. In all of this, taqwa is forgotten. In all of these obsessing over boundaries, limitations, and what can and cannot be done, the wisdom is lost, the spirit is lost. وَأْتُوا الْبُيُوتَ مِنْ أَبْوَابِهَا. So enter your houses through their doors. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. And observe the taqwa of Allah. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. So that you are successful. Reflect and think about how all of these rituals and conforming to the form of the rituals is leading to taqwa. If it is not leading to taqwa, then merely holding on to the lines or the boundaries that you've drawn is no good. The spirit has to be taken in concert. وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ. And fight in the cause of Allah those who fight against you. With this ayah, permission is explicitly granted. Now this is not a command in the sense that you take the initiative yourselves. Rather, it is more a progress towards the command that will later on come in these same ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah. Permission to fight was granted to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam step by step. As long as they were in Mecca, even in self-defense, no level of retaliation was allowed. Something that Surah Nisa testifies to. Have you not seen the people who were told, Kuffu aydiyakum, hold back your hands, tie up your hands, even in retaliation? Whatever Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu was subjected to, whatever Khabbab bin al-Arat is being subjected to, whatever the Muslims are watching is being done to Yasir and Sumayya radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, they are not allowed to do anything in retaliation, not anything in defending the people who they see are being killed in front of their very eyes. But they're asked to hold back your hands. And this is the discipline that, especially for the likes of Hamzah radiallahu ta'ala anhu and Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who are not the kind of people who are going to take this level of torture on their own people and not say anything about it. But it was the discipline of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that said, not yet. This is not the time for it. We have all the justification for it. But any premature aggression will result in what is a movement in its infancy to be completely squashed. So there is no justification, no permission for even those who are taking the beating themselves. A desperate man, in their desperation, when they know death is inevitable, can take down at least a couple of people before they go down. But even there, they're required to maintain that discipline. Now, when the tables turn, when migration takes place, there is a progressive degree of permission that is granted. Okay, now you have the right. Now those people who are holding you back from the Kaaba, now you have permission to fight against them. وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا, but do not exceed the limit. This permission comes with a great deal of caution, with a great deal of warning. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ. Allah definitely does not like the aggressors. وَقُتُلُوهُمْ حَيْثُ ثَقِفْتُمُوهُمْ, and kill them wherever you find them. وَأَخْرِجُوهُمْ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَخْرَجُوكُمْ, and drive them out wherever they drove you out from. So now it's becoming even more explicit that these Quraysh drove you out from your homes. These people were killing and fighting you, so now they're open game. Now holding back is not righteous. Now you have to resort to aggression yourself. وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ, creating mischief. The fitna that they're causing is far worse than killing. No question this was a last resort. But this last resort has to be taken up, for what is resulting without this last resort being taken up is far worse. The oppression of the people, the tyranny that they have to face, the lack of freedom to really, the religion that they are being charged with, that they're responsible for. They're obstructing people from Tawheed. And this obstruction of people from Tawheed, whereas they're brandishing this form of tolerance to practically all gods, but they have a problem with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's where their tolerance drives to its limit. It's tolerant to practically any kind of deity, but when it comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam speaking about Allah ar-Rahman, there's an irritation. Their standards change. They exhibit very blatantly their double standards, and that is what results in this permission coming about. وَلَا تُقَاتِلُهُمْ عِنْدَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ, and do not fight with them in the surroundings of the sacred mosque, حَتَّى يُقَاتِلُوكُمْ فِي, until they attack you. فَإِنْ قَاتَلُوكُمْ فَاقْتُلُوهُمْ, but if they fight you, then you kill them. كَذَلِكَ جَزَاءُ الْكَافِرِينَ, that is the punishment of these disbelievers. فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا, but if they cease, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, then for sure Allah is forgiving and merciful. Again, an implication of embodying the attributes of Allah. If they cease, then you need to be able to embody these attributes of forgiveness and mercy as well, because Allah is Ghafoor and Rahim. وَقَاتِلُهُمْ حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةً. How far do you go? You fight against them until there is no fitna. وَيَكُونَ الدِّينُ لِلَّهِ, and the supremacy completely belongs to Allah. This is the goal that has been stated outright beginning of the Madani period. فَإِنْ انْتَهَوْا, but if they cease, فَلَا عُدْوَانَ إِلَّا عَلَى الظَّالِمِينَ, then let there be no hostility except against the oppressors. There is a very convenient opinion that is popularized that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum were not there, they were not initiating the conflict after migration. That for them, it was entirely in self-defense, that the Quraysh had advanced against them, that the Quraysh wanted to subdue them even in Medina, which is contrary to the sources. The narrative in the Quran and what we find in books of Seerah goes against that. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, with these ayats, have the explicit permission to retaliate against the people of Quraysh. The initiation from the Quraysh has come within Makkah itself. That's already happened. They've drawn first blood. They've already done the aggression. Now the retaliation is mandated. Strategically, their idea was, they were very explicit about it, let these people of Muhammad be. Forget about them. They've gone to Medina, they're not our problem anymore. The other Arabs will take care of them. If they are victorious against the other Arabs, then that's our victory, because at the end of the day, they're Quraysh. So we are supreme all over again. But if they are not victorious and they die and they're killed, they fail, then that's what you wanted to begin with. You don't have to get your hands dirty with your cousins, your brethren, and the problem is solved. So let the other Arabs take care of them. We're sitting tight in Mecca, not having to lift any swords. We've done what we had to do. Now it's them and the rest of Arabia. It was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who made sure that the caravans of the Quraysh, which were the lifeline for the people of Mecca, they are attacked, they are obstructed. Remember, for the Quraysh, their protection is guaranteed in all of Arabia. For highway robberies are a common accepted practice even within the Arabian Peninsula. It is not against the morality of the time. It is completely the norm for people to take that on. You're getting on with your caravan of goods at your own risk. How do the Quraysh protect themselves? They protect themselves because they have the idols of every tribe in the peninsula in Mecca, in the Kaaba. And so their retaliation or their threat is, we have your idols hostage. We are the caretakers of this holy mosque or this holy Kaaba. If you harm a hair on the head of anyone from our caravan, or we lose anything, then we're going to snap the neck of this idol right here. So that was the security, the political security that they got, that allowed them that economic privilege because of their religious center, them being the religious center. And that's one of the fears that they had, that if we go tawheed, if we forget about all of this idolatry has a political motive that it's serving for us. Then the Quran quotes them as well in different places, that if we do this, people will just do away with us. We will be snatched up, eaten alive. This is the only reason why people are letting us be. And they're being reminded, no, you're being let be. You have peace because Ibrahim alayhi salam made dua and Allah accepted that dua. That's why you have peace. You see the sabab of that peace to be the absolute, to be the ultimate, and you're giving too much credit to yourself. Now, however, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there is no idol in the Kaaba that him or anyone from Yathrib is too possessive about, or at all possessive about. There is no contract, there is no treaty, there is no alliance. Rather, there is every reason, because of what the Quraysh have already done in Mecca in those 10 years, to retaliate. And so they do. And now the Quraysh are clueless. What do we do now? We're economically being stifled. Our jugular vein is literally under their foot. We have to fight back, and that's what culminates in Badr, which is of course discussed in Surah Anfal. الشهر الحرام بالشهر الحرام. The forbidden month is retaliated in the forbidden month. وَالْحُرُمَاتُ قِصَاص. And for all violations is legal retaliation. The idea, however, even in war, is that whatever rules are agreed upon, whatever principles are agreed upon, they have to be honored. So if there are principles of not fighting within holy months, they are to be regarded. This is not all is fair in love and war. This is not all, everything is not game. There are rules that have to be honored, that have to be respected, especially if you have an alliance, if you have a treaty with a particular tribe, that treaty has to be honored. If that treaty is violated by them, then you have to announce that this treaty no longer stands, then you can aggress. You cannot have treaty on the face of it and then infiltrations under the table. That doesn't work. The word of the Muslim, the word of the believing community, the contracts of the believing community are to be honored above and beyond anything and everything else. Not everything is fair game. فَمَنْ اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ. So if someone transgresses and attacks you, فَاعْتَدُوا عَلَيْهِ بِمِثْلِ مَا اعْتَدَى عَلَيْكُمْ. Then retaliate against them in the same way they attacked you. not looking to go beyond or do more than what they've done. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, and have the taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْمُتَّقِينَ, and keep in mind that Allah is with the people of taqwa. وَأَنفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and invest in the cause of Allah. وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ, and do not cast yourselves into destruction with your own hands. Your iman demands from you to spend in the way of Allah. Now this spending is specifically fi sabilillah, for the deen of Allah. This is for that hatta la takuna fitna, so that the test, the trial, all the oppression that exists in the land, it has to be removed. It has to be done away with. Spending is in that direction. We will find this repeated throughout the rest of Surah Al-Baqarah. Spend, spend, spend in the way of Allah. And not spending, not doing infaq, opens you up to nifaq, which is hypocrisy. وَأَحْسِنُوا, and achieve excellence. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. Truly, Allah loves the people of ihsan. Again, this is a group of people who are now coming to power, who have more power than they had before, for sure. But then with this power, at every step along the way, as permissions are being given, an incredible emphasis is laid on the responsibility that it comes with. Because inevitably, people who have power do exploit. They do cause corruption. It is only and only when that power is balanced by a morality which is rooted in scripture, which is rooted in taqwa, which is rooted in ihsan, that exploitation is guarded against. In Surah Muhammad, there is a very critical ayah, very important ayah, and Surah Muhammad is right around the same time it is being revealed as Surah Baqarah is being revealed as well. فَهَلْ عَسَيْتُمْ إِن تَوَلَّيْتُمْ أَن تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. One of the meanings of tawallaytum, the more popular meaning is if you turn back. Fair enough. That is definitely a meaning. Another meaning is when you're given power, when you're giving authority in the land. فَهَلْ عَسَيْتُمْ إِن تَوَلَّيْتُمْ أَن تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَتُقَطِّعُوا أَرْحَامَكُمْ. That if this process of purification does not take place, if this rooting in morality is not there, if the people in charge are not tested to the core for where their loyalties lie, how sincere they actually are. If that is not done, and somebody just is born into power, then rest assured there is going to be fasad fil ard, and there is going to be, relationships are going to suffer. That's the result when a people come in power without having gone through the process. If it is a group of people who are retaliating against their oppressors and they do not go through the process of moral development, then they're going to just replace the tyrants and become tyrants themselves. It's one group of tyrants replacing another group of tyrants. That's not a revolution. That's just tyranny changing hands. And that is not what the Quran wants. That is not what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is for. And so that discipline in Mecca, that through and through, that we see with Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, for example, that in the heat of the battle, when he is about to kill his enemy who spits in his face, Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu gets back up, gives him his sword and says, let's fight again, all over again. Because now that you've spit in my face, it's become personal. And I don't want to deal no blows for personal reasons. This is not personal at all. So a people who have not gone through that process, that very rigorous process of tazkiyah, and their priorities have not been placed in where they belong, where they need to be, that it is sincerely for the sake of Allah, those people are going to be using religion for injustice, for tyranny, for vested interest. Something that the Quraysh were doing. Something that the leaders and the ulama of the Jewish people in Medina are being criticized for doing as well. Then the same religion becomes a source of oppression. And that is important for us to know, because we like to think, we like to believe that secularism, post-enlightenment, is the first critic of religion ever. And that in order to do away with religious injustice, religious tyranny, you have to do away with religion. The champions of enlightenment, or the enlightenment thinkers or politicians who exploited the enlightenment thought, they weren't the first to criticize religion. In fact, throughout scripture, whether biblical or Quranic, you will see a criticism of religion of the highest order. But religious or scriptural criticism of religion is honest in that it comes from a defined religious perspective. You know which religious perspective is criticizing the other religious perspective. It is clearly defined. Secularism does not pose itself as religion. It defines itself as no religion, which it is not, which is clear now more than ever before. Secularism has become a religion in itself. It has its own gods. It has its own worldview. It has its own sources. In every domain, whether education or psychology or science, whatever you want to talk about, there are alternative deities that the religion of secularism has put up, and they're more difficult to identify because they don't have a religious garb, they don't have a very clear scripture that they allude to. All the better to hide behind and continue your tyranny. And that's what the world is faced with right now. When it was the European monarchs tag teaming with the church and exploiting people, you knew it is these monarchs, it is these kings, and it is this Christianity that is supporting this tyranny. It was clear for all to see. Now it's become so muddied, so obscure, that you need at least some level of intelligence to be able to see it. That this is a religion, there are tyrants, and this democracy or secularism or whatever is just a front. It's not true democracy or true secularism, even for that matter. It's the same. And hence the fasad. And the result is the same. وَتُقَطِّعُوا أَرْحَامَكُمْ. Your relationships are being severed. A sign of a tawheedic society, a society in which monotheism, in which true scripture is being followed, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam revived and perfected. In that society, relationships would be honored. Please. Exactly. Specifically, a holistic understanding of Islam. It is Richard Dawkins, very recently. He said he's an atheist. He's the most militant atheist alive. Proponent of scientism and you name it. And he says he has no problem with Christianity. He identifies himself as a cultural Christian. What he has a problem with is Islam. He's very blatant when it comes to which religion he has a problem with. So the limitations of tolerance, and you see how it's just a smokescreen. How all these humanitarian values, of how these ideals of justice and liberty and human rights, they don't extend when the people on the other end are brown, or Muslim specifically, or black. There's a very clear color to them, and it's white. And it's more white in its ideology than in its skin color too now. That's how twisted things have become. Because you'll have brown people and black people and even Muslims advocating for this white supremacy. وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. Complete the Hajj and Umrah. So Hajj being the obligatory and Umrah being the voluntary journey to Mecca for the sake of Allah. فَإِنْ أُحْصِرْتُمْ. But if you are prevented, فَمَسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدِي. Then sacrifice whatever can easily be obtained of sacrificial animals. Here you see the foresight of the Quran. From the get-go, they're in Medina. You can't go for Hajj. It is not possible without being killed, really. You just came away from Mecca. But the obligation of Hajj is being established here and now. That this is an obligation you can't steer clear of. So the focus remains on Mecca throughout the time period in Medina for Rasulullah ﷺ until the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. This obligation, this command, if it's being revealed in the first year of Hijrah, first year of migration, it's not fulfilled until the 7th. It takes that long in the coming, but it is being given nevertheless. وَلَا تُحْلِقُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ. And do not shave your heads حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْهَدْيُ مَحِلَّهُ. Until the hadi, which is to be sacrificed, reaches its destination. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا. Whoever among you is ill, أَوْ بِهِ أَذًى مِنْ رَأْسِهِ. Or he has an ailment in his scalp, فَفِدْيَةٌ مِنْ صِيَامٍ أَوْ صَدَقَةٍ أَوْ نُسُكٍ. Then he must in compensation either fast or give in charity or make a sacrifice. Again, you see, within a divine religion, there's always ways. There's no rigidities. There's no absolute prohibitions or absolute demands. Allah being At-Tawwab, a living God who is always turning towards people who turn towards Him, gives ways back. It is only in the superstitious ideals of demonic religiosity that if you've missed a turn, you're gone. There's no U-turn. If you've put a foot wrong, you're done, you're gone. Now you simmer in unforgivable sin forever. That is not the kind of religiosity or not the kind of ideal that the Quran talks about. If there's legitimate reasons why you can't fulfill X, go ahead with Y. Can't do that, go ahead with Z. There's always exceptions that are provided. And none more beautifully so than in the hadith of that person who ends up violating his fast, cannot fast because he found his wife way too attractive during the time of fasting. And he comes to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his complaint that, what do I do now? And Rasulullah says, okay, fast 2 months straight. Like, I'm having trouble with this 1 month. How am I supposed to do with 2 months? We're like, okay, give in charity. And he's like, Ya Rasulullah, who's more deserving of charity than my own family? We're dirt poor. And he's like, okay, give in charity to your family. You see the level to which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes, that there are individual exceptions that will be made. That this is not a religion of absolute rigidities that is to make certain people feel horrible about themselves, for they simply do not have the capacity to live up to its injunction. The capacity of individuals is honored, it's respected. That is what it means to be in the religion of a living God, Al-Hayy. فَمَنْ تَمَتَّعَ بِالْعُمْرَةِ إِلَى الْحَجِّ. And anyone who performs Umrah before Hajj, فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدِي, has to sacrifice the easily available sacrificial animal. فَمَنْ لَمْ يَجِدْ. But the one who cannot find or cannot afford, فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ فِي الْحَجِّ, has to fast 3 days during the Hajj. وَسَبْعَةٍ إِذَا رَجَعْتُمْ. And 7 more when you return after the completion of Hajj. تِلْكَ عَشَرَةٌ كَامِلَةٌ. That's 10 in total. ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ لَمْ يَكُنْ أَهْلُهُ حَاضِرِ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. This is a facility for those whose families are not present in the vicinity of the sacred mosque. They are the non-residents of Mecca. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. And observe taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا. And keep in mind, أَنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. That Allah is severe in punishment. Al-Hajju ashhurun ma'lumat. Hajj is in the well-known months. فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ الْحَجْ. So whoever obligates Hajj upon himself, i.e. makes the intention for ihram, enters into a state of ihram, فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجْ. There should not be any sex-related expression, even between husband and wife, no disobedience, no disputing, even while in Hajj. وَمَا تَفْعَلُ مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمْهُ اللَّهُ. And whatever good you do, Allah knows it. وَتَزَوَّدُوا. And take necessary provisions for yourself during the journey. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. But the best provision is that of taqwa. وَاتَّقُونِ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And observe my taqwa, people of understanding. It is in the well-known months, so in the sense that this is the months in which Hajj is to be done is already known. So from whatever is customary. The names of the months, as we spoke about earlier as well, this was something that was prevalent even prior to the coming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So pilgrimage was a practice. It was very tainted. So in these ayat, what we see is a clarification being offered with respect to the practice of pilgrimage of Hajj that is done, but it has all of these bid'at, it has all of these activities that are not really prescribed by Allah. So in that clarification, what is already known, whatever is already being practiced and is correct, is also being validated. That it's okay for those to continue as such. Yeah. Yeah. So Hajj is, when it comes together with Umrah, then Hajj and Umrah are separately connoted. Umrah being the voluntary and Hajj being the obligatory. But Hajj is also, it connotes Umrah when it comes by itself. So the voluntary pilgrimage can also be connoted, it would also be connoted with Hajj. So the specific journey of Hajj, the obligatory one, that's in the Hajj. But then there's other times for Umrah as well that would still count as pilgrimage, but that would be the minor pilgrimage. So this is a general rule. Yeah. So there are specific, I see what you're saying. I do not know what that is specifically referring to. That would have to be looked into. Barakallahu feekum. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى وَاتَّقُونِ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. And the best provision is taqwa, and observe my taqwa, people of understanding. So there are these limitations, but what these limitations are contributing towards or pointing towards or leading towards is the development of taqwa. Hajj as a practice brings together all the other pillars and the benefit and the wisdom behind those other pillars. Salah is dhikr. Hajj includes dhikr in every form, including salah. Zakat is spending, in that sense sacrificing, giving. Hajj includes spending and sacrificing as well. So whatever benefits are there for the growth of spirituality of the person of the taqwa, from that perspective is there. Sawm is a form of discipline controlling against that which usually would be allowed. In a state of ihram, those things are not going to be allowed as such. So it brings together, Hajj brings together all the benefits, everything that other forms or other pillars offer within itself. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَبْتَغُوا فَضْلًا مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. There is no blame on you that you seek some bounty of your Rabb during this journey. Again, you're making this journey. If there is a business opportunity, something that offers something of worldly benefit, there is no reason to feel guilty about taking advantage of it. Especially again, for us, this may not seem very significant, but for people who are traveling, well, if they're going for Hajj this year, they're probably coming back next year. There's no planes. They're either going with caravans on foot or by ship or what have you. It's not a 20-day package. It's a year-long trip, and there's a lot of risk to life as well. So there is something or the other that needs to be done to make ends meet along the way, to take on something which is going to help you get by. And so if that's happening, there is no reason for you to feel guilty about it. That is the fadl of your Rabb. فَإِذَا أَفَضْتُم مِّنْ عَرَفَاتٍ But when you return from Arafat together, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ عِنْدَ الْمَشْعَرِ الْحَرَامِ Remember Allah near Mash'ar al-Haram, which is Muzdalifah. وَاذْكُرُوهُ كَمَا هَدَاكُمْ And remember Him in the way He guided you. وَإِن كُنتُم مِّن قَبْلِهِ لَمِنَ الضَّالِّينَ And for sure you were certainly of those who had lost the way before this. ثُمَّ أَفِيضُوا مِنْ حَيْثُ أَفَاضَ النَّاسِ Afterwards return from there in the way the others do. So they had made separate rules for themselves and for others. Allah is making it clear that it's all the same for everyone. وَاسْتَغْفِرُ اللَّهِ And seek Allah's forgiveness. إِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ For sure Allah is forgiving and merciful. فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُم مَنَاسِكَكُمْ So when you have completed your sacred duties, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ كَذِكْرِكُمْ آبَاءَكُمْ أَوْ أَشَدَّ ذِكْرًا Remember Allah the way you used to remember your forefathers. So the way the Hajj had been corrupted is that in the process, they're remembering God, yeah, but they're also remembering their forefathers. So it's become something of this jingoist activity in which their own historical figures, their lineage, is being exalted. So there is this boastful chanting of names of one's own forefathers that is taking place within the time of Hajj. That is being abolished. You're not doing that anymore. It is the remembrance of Allah only, or even greater than your remembrance of your forefather is the remembrance of Allah that is necessary. فَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَقُولُ And among people is the one who says, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا Our Rabb, grant us in this world. وَمَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ And he will not get any share in the hereafter. Again, this person is not asking from Lat, Uzza or Manat. This person is not doing any shirk. This person is doing Hajj. And he is doing Hajj, and in doing Hajj is asking Allah, his Rabb, for something in this world. The criticism is not who he's asking. The criticism, what he's asking for. More importantly, what he is not asking for. What does not become a part of his priorities, which is akhirah. That he is in this ritual, undertaking all of these activities and sacrifice and difficulties that come with the pilgrimage. Yet, he is not being appreciated, rather he's being criticized that he's not going to get anything from the hereafter. For he has no portion, no share in the hereafter. But the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about a person who is tired, exhausted from the journey of Hajj. And he is in front of the Kaaba. And he is raising his hands, imploring Allah with tears in his eyes. And he's saying, Ya Rabb, Ya Rabb, Ya Rabb, Ya Rabb. And Rasulullah says, how is his prayer going to be answered when the food that he eats is haram, the clothes that he's wearing is haram? When he did not regard Allah in his earning and his spending, then why would Allah respond to him? How would he be responded to? Point being that so many of our religious activities, not excluding Hajj, become solely for the sake of some immediate benefit in dunya. And it is just that attitude that uses religion for very personal, very selfish, very immediate interests. That kind of attitude is destructive overall for the purposes of religion. That person who is being religious, but is being religious for a very circumscribed reason, is going to be a person who is going to misrepresent religiosity itself. So if with that religiosity is no real concern for akhirah, this is a person to be steered clear of. It is a person that you don't want to become. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُولُ, and among them is the one who says, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. Our Rabb, bless us with good in this world and good in the hereafter. وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and save us from the torment of the fire. Allah's response is not that the good person is the one who says, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. No, that would be going to that other demonic extreme. The balance, something that we spoke about last time emphatically, that with these passages in Surah Al-Baqarah, the intertwining of dunya and akhirah, that how deeply related the both are, where you can't really talk about one without talking about the other. That's the personality of the believer that is being engendered here. Somebody who looks at dunya and akhirah from that perspective cannot talk about dunya without the perspective of akhirah, cannot talk about akhirah without the perspective of dunya. The person who is prioritizing dunya and excluding akhirah, not the kind of person you want to be. You also don't want to be the other kind of person who completely excludes dunya apparently and wants to be of akhirah only. That's not the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The person who came to the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Ummahatul Mu'mineen, and inquired about how much fasting does the Prophet do, how much prayer does the Prophet do, what are his activities like? And they honestly told him how much he prayed, how much he fasted, and how he was with his spouses. One of them responded, "Oh, he's the Prophet. I have to do more than he does. I am going to fast continuously with no break." The second one said, "I am going to stay up entire night and no sleep. That's how much I'm going to pray." And the third one is right, "I am never going to get married. I am going to dedicate and commit myself to the worship of Allah only." When Rasulullah ﷺ came back and he heard of these three people and what they'd said, he called them back. He was red in the face. And he said, "I am more righteous than any of you. Don't you dare pull that one on me. That's not religion. That is not righteousness, what you're saying. I fast and I take breaks. I pray and I also sleep. And I have done nikah, and nikahu min sunnati. It is from my sunnah. فَمَنْ رَغِبَ عَنْ سُنَّتِي فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever abstains or turns away from my sunnah has nothing to do with me. So don't pull these ideas of extreme religiosity and pass them in my name. You have nothing to do with me if that's what you're doing. Because it's not just your personal practice. Every single one of us live in a community. Our practice influences others. It affects other people. Inevitably, we're preaching whether we say anything or not. And so if we take on a particular lifestyle, that lifestyle is infectious. And if people are turned away from religiosity because of that particular lifestyle in its extreme, then we have a responsibility towards that. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا. The people who balance آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا and فِي الْآخِرَةِ, they are the people who will be given a share of what they have earned, i.e. what they've worked for. So this religiosity is no cheat code to get through dunya. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا كَسَبُوا. Dua, prayer, is not a way of bypassing effort, of the struggle that is necessary. The laws through which Allah's world works and society works, they have to be regarded. They did not change for anyone. Not even the family of the Prophet ﷺ. Whoever was politically and militarily superior, one was prevailed, even if on the other side was the taqwa, the righteousness, the sincerity, the purity of Imam Hassan and Hussein radiallahu ta'ala anhum. It is that clear that those exceptions are not going to be made. So if you're turning towards religiosity to get some cheat codes so you don't have to work as hard, that's not how it works. Definitely that was not the case with the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum in the aftermath of the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Nevertheless, that's how the political landscape turned out. And those laws of Allah, those sunnah of Allah, played out as they usually do. They did not make any exception. Please. Not at all. I did that too. I did that not for soccer. I did that for my exam. And I did well on my exam. And for me as a teenager, that was an incredibly important step in my religiosity. So the problem is not with me praying for my exam or for my soccer team and then even winning. That's actually a huge boost. Or passing the exam. The problem is that when the game is over and when the exam is gone, or a sickness is gone, or the fear of unemployment, whatever it is that I prayed for, when that is lifted and my prayer is also gone, I'm no longer praying, right? I am no longer as fervent, as zealous in my dua. When it's my health, when it's the health of my child, naturally the intensity, the sincerity of my dua increases. That's natural. When I need something in this dunya, I'm supposed to turn to Allah. It's just that my relationship with Allah should not just be for transactions of dunya. It should be for transactions of dunya and more. And for my concerns in the hereafter. And that has to be deliberately, consciously worked upon. Because that may not come with that much, that may not be as instinctive as when I'm in a life-death situation or somebody I love is in a life-death situation and I'm praying. That's instinctive. Praying, even the mushrikeen would forget other deities and focus solely on Allah. That is actually one of the psychological reasons for Tawheed. That is a psychological experience of Tawheed. But once that calamity is over or that difficult time is over, I'm supposed to maintain something of that and work to increase it to the level of my akhirah concerns become as instinctive, as natural. Does that make sense? Fair enough. Not for Costco, but for my akhirah. For my heaven and hell. To be saved from the hellfire, to go to heaven. Right? That concern needs to be a living, regular concern. And that would be in my routine life when everything seems to be hunky-dory. Right? Everything is going my way. My concern for akhirah is what I need to nurture. Sense? All right. أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ نَصِيبٌ مِمَّا كَسَبُوا. But that soccer game that I prayed for, the exam that I prayed for, I still have to study for it. I still have to train for it. I can't say because I'm Muslim and the other team is not, they're probably not praying, I have an edge in this. That's not how it works. If that was the case, then at least Muslims would have won some World Cups. All we got is Senegal reached the semifinal, and that was in 98 or whatever. Nothing after that. None of that happened. We hosted a World Cup, but that's pretty much it. You got to put in the training. You got to put in the effort. The kasabu part has to be focused upon. And that's true for business. That's true for politics. That is true just because we're Muslim. We don't have to do the drills. We don't have to put in the effort. And that's what our complaint as an ummah has been to Allah for the past 2 centuries or so. That why are non-Muslims given power over us? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Where's your work? Show your work. Show your effort. If your effort and your work is not in that direction, if you say, oh, but we were praying, we did qunut nazla, we did, and so many people were crying, and we did it in all the mosques in the entire world, well, Gaza is still suffering. Because you're not putting in the work. The physical, material work in the world that has to be put in. Wallahu sari'ul hisab. Allah is swift in settling the account. وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْدُودَاتٍ. And praise Allah during a few specific days. وَفَمَنْ تَعَجَّلَ في يومين فلا إثم عليه. So whoever hastens his departure in those 2 days of staying in Mina has no sin on him. ومن تأخر فلا إثم عليه. And whoever delays to the third day has no sin either. لمن اتقى, provided they stay with taqwa. واتقوا الله, and observe the taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّكُمْ إِلَيْهِ تُحْشَرُونَ. And keep in mind that you will all be gathered before him. The message that you want to come back from when you go for Umrah or Hajj, that the gathering that is going to be before Allah on the day. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يُعْجِبُكَ قَوْلُهُ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. And there are people whose speech impresses you in this life of the life of this world. وَيُشْهِدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا فِي قَلْبِهِ. And he may even call to Allah, call Allah as witness as to what is in his heart. And this the Quran does not shirk away from throughout its narrative of hypocrisy, that those in positions of power, those in positions of influence, those wealthier, they are more prone to hypocrisy. It is a natural predilection. It's what comes as part of the package. It's the risk of being influential, rich, well-spoken. The ability to articulate. The more this ability to articulate is nurtured, refined, perfected, it also means that you can worm your way out of situations. It also means you can deceive others and yourself. You have better tools to fool yourself and others. You have better abilities to rationalize. So, whilst we're supposed to, for the good of the community, for the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, not at all abandon, whether it's political or it's economic or it's social growth, influence, have at it. We're supposed to. It's a requirement because we don't, others will, and they're not going to carry the morality that we want should be carried. But we need to bear in mind what the risks are. And therefore the responsibility upon such people to invest from the gifts or the blessings that they've worked for and developed, that Allah has nevertheless blessed them with, to be more inclined towards charity, to be more inclined towards infaq fi sabilillah, spending in the way of Allah, because the risk is greater. وَإِذَا تَوَلَّى, when he goes away, this influential, impressive person, where he goes away, سَعَى فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيُفْسِدَ فِيهَا. So again, the tawalla here can also have both meanings. Either when he turns his back, goes away, or when he is put in charge, given power, when he is given wilaya, when he is the wali, i.e. in charge. سَعَى فِي الْأَرْضِ لِيُفْسِدَ فِيهَا. He makes effort throughout the earth, causing corruption. وَيُهْلِكَ الْحَرْثَ وَالنَّسْلِ, and to destroy crop and cattle. وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الْفَسَادِ. Allah does not like corruption. So whenever a person of corruption, as impressive as they may be, as well-spoken as they may be, as branded as their clothes may be, if they weasel their way to the top, and they haven't gone through the moral effort, so they've worked to build on their economic or social or political influence. Fair enough. But what has not been worked upon in parallel is the moral side, the spiritual side. What restrains them? Is that person suspicious of themselves? Is that person aware of the vulnerability towards hypocrisy that increases with success? The better grades you get, the better jobs you get, the more money you get, the more people appreciate you, the better abilities you have in terms of eloquence. The doors to hypocrisy are proportionately open. And if we don't carry that understanding, then we're just as good as sitting ducks. And they will target us, they will overwhelm us, and we think we're doing good, whereas we are proponents of fasad, of corruption. And when وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُ اتَّقِ اللَّهِ, when he is asked to have the taqwa of Allah, others are seeing something's changed about this person. Ever since they gained influence or money or power, they're not the same anymore. What happened to that humility? What happened to that? This person used to exude this taqwa of Allah. Now he has clout. He has an entourage of people wherever he goes. He tweets, the world listens. He burps on Instagram and he has 2,000 likes. What has happened? And with that, his attitude is also changing. His habits are also changing. There are more liberties that he's taking for himself. The boundaries are slackening. It's okay if there's no accountability of certain economic transactions here and there. Now I'm a sheikh. Now I have respect. It's okay if there is khalwa with the opposite genders. I'm reliable. It's cool. And before you know it, and there will be some people who be like, no, you're crossing certain boundaries. That's not good. Have the taqwa of Allah. Such people are not open to criticism. Do you know who you're criticizing? Do you know who you're talking to? Do you think I don't know this? Who the hell do you think you are? I didn't get to this position. I didn't get this power or this authority or this ilm or this reputation by not making any efforts for it. I've done my time. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? أَخَذَتْهُ الْعِزَّةُ بِالْإِثْمِ. Arrogance carries that person to sin. There are well-wishers, people who are not fooled by what's apparent. They're warning, like, brother, be careful. Sister, take guard. You're telling me? To always remain open. Again, none of this is to say that influence, power, growth, economically, politically, socially, is to be abandoned. That's the safer route. Yeah, it's safer, but then who's suffering? The community is suffering. The community is not getting stronger either. The ummah is suffering. That is to be undertaken, but with the precaution. Making sure that there is a group of people who have the right to criticize. And you are open towards their criticism. You are reflective on whatever it is that they're saying. You can't isolate yourself and place yourself on a pedestal and then look down upon everybody. Oh, I have to guide everyone. I have so much responsibility on my shoulders. Please. I'm sorry? Say that again? Yeah. So it does. And so there would be perhaps not a monetary giving in that case necessarily. Of course, if there is money that should be given to some extent, not to the extent of the wealthy person perhaps, but in a greater proportion at least from others not as blessed. But then with respect to prayer, especially prayer in privacy, masjid is always easier. By yourself is hard. How much time is being spent over there? That quote-unquote zakat, non-monetary type, is being undertaken in those domains over there. In making sure that those boundaries, those exceptions that are withheld, that are taken very good care of in the early part of your religious journey, are also taken care of regardless of how far ahead you may seem to be in that religious journey. Right? And number 3, openness to community. Making sure there are people in your circle who can call you out and they don't fall for your supposed influence and popularity. They can see through the BS. So you remain in contact with very hurtful people who will not mind giving you a piece of their mind. أَخَذَتْهُ الْعِزَّةُ بِالْإِثْمِ. But this particular person, when he is being criticized, is like, the arrogance carries him to sin. فَحَسْبُهُ جَهَنَّمْ. Hell is enough for him. وَلَبِئْسَ الْمِهَادُ. What a wretched place to rest in. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ. While among the people there are those who sell themselves. ابتغاء مرضات الله, seeking Allah's pleasure. This sacrifice is being taken to the next level altogether. Their own self for the sake of Allah. Wallahu ra'ufum bil ibad, and Allah is affectionate, incredibly compassionate towards His ibad. We see all the detail about the others. In this, there is just a mention and then silence. As if to say, as for these people, what good or what reward I'm going to give them is none of your business. I'll take care of them. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dkhulu fis silmi kaffah. Moral of the story, all the preceding passages, from La tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan that came in the very beginning, where the eating kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum, from there all the way to here. Why? Enter into Islam completely. This picking and choosing, this giving yourself that level of authority, this becoming your own God, that is not acceptable. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Do not follow the footsteps of shaitan. إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌّ مُبِينٌ. He is your open enemy. فَإِنْ زَلَلْتُم مِّن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْكُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. But if you slip back after clear signs have reached you, فَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. Then keep in mind that Allah is mighty and wise. هَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا أَن تَأْتِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي ظُلَلٍ مِّنَ الْغَمَامِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ. Are they waiting that Allah should come to them in the covers of clouds along with the angels? وَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرُ. And the matter is decided. I.e., are they waiting for the azab, or are they waiting for the day of judgment? Is that when they're going to turn back? Is that when they're going to pay heed to the ayat of Allah and start taking this seriously? وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ. And to Allah all matters are ultimately returned. Break for 5 minutes. وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. So very quickly, I went back to my notes and I figured out Ashhurum Ma'lumat. So the idea in this is these are the months in which you can put on ihram and make an intention for Hajj. And for most people, it starts with Shawwal, right? So for most opinions, for most fuqaha, if it's done in any other months, it's makruh, or for the ahnaf, for others, that doesn't count at all. So, yeah. Barakallahu feekum. Thank you for asking. Otherwise, I would just, anything fiqh, I just go over it. It doesn't register with me even if I read it. Alhamdulillah. Okay. So, where we end? Sal Bani Israel. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Sal Bani Israel. Ask the Bani Israel. Kam ataynahu min ayatin bayyinah. How many clear signs have we given them? وَمَن يُبَدِّلْ نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُ. As for those who exchange the favor of Allah after it has reached them, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. Then for sure Allah is severe in punishment too. The example of the Bani Israel is standing in front of you. The ayat that they were given, the number of prophets that came to them, and with each prophet, different ayat were given to them. The ayat that are in the Quran are far greater, both in number as well as in stature. So, replacing the ayat of Allah, the ni'mah, the blessings of Allah, after it has come, is setting ourselves up for the retribution of Allah. زُيِّنَ لِلَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا. Beautified for the people of disbelief is the life of this world. وَيَسْخَرُونَ مِنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And so they mock the people who believe. وَالَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا فَوْقَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. But the people of taqwa will rank above them on the day of judgment. وَاللَّهُ يَرْزُقُ مَن يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. And Allah grants beyond all measure to whoever He wills. كَانَ النَّاسُ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. Mankind was a single community. فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ النَّبِيِّينَ مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ. Then Allah appointed prophets, bearing good news and warnings. وَأَنزَلَ مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ. And He sent down with them scriptures and with truth. لِيَحْكُمَ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ فِي مَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ. To settle the matters of dispute between them. So people have some level of, they're at a particular level. When the prophets come, they bring the book, they bring clarification. They're at a particular level, they have a level of consensus, but they have ikhtilaf in certain other matters. Part of the function of prophethood is to clarify those disputes for them. وَمَا اخْتَلَفَ فِيهِ. And nobody differed with it, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ أُوتُوهُ. Except those who were already blessed with something before. So the prophets come, they bring scripture, they bring bayyinat, they bring clear ayat, and they offer clarifications for whatever was disputed between them. Now those who previously themselves were in a position of knowledge, and on account of that knowledge, authority, they were the first ones to refute the prophets. So it's not people of ignorance that reject truth. It's actually the people of knowledge. Because they have knowledge, there is no disputing the fact that they're more knowledgeable. But that knowledge did not result in them becoming better people. And that is a critical difference that we see highlighted throughout the Quran. Even the prayer that we make, Rabbi zidni ilma. My Rabb, increase me. Not increase my knowledge, increase me in my knowledge. So if I am not increasing, but my knowledge is increasing, then I'm setting myself up to be that person when truth comes in front of me. What truth? I don't see no truth. This seems all the more dubious to me. You seem to have an intent to take over. You want authority. You want power. You want to put me down. All that projection starts. I see in other people what is actually a disease within me. And so another important dua of the Prophet ﷺ, which comes in both forms, he asks for beneficial knowledge. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'a. He asks for beneficial knowledge and he seeks refuge from knowledge that is not beneficial. To bear that in mind, that knowledge for the sake of itself is no good. Where is the pragmatic benefit? Especially a benefit in conduct. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Those who really are scholars, ulama, in the Quranic terminology, they're khashiyah of Allah. That's the index. That's the sign. So I may be increasing in my factual knowledge, in my Arabic, in my understanding of this information or that information from the Quran or outside of the Quran. But if I'm not becoming a better person, if I'm not becoming a more humble person, if I'm not increasing in that khashiyah of Allah, if that is not being added to, then I'm in trouble. Now the solution for that is not that I avoid knowledge for the fitna that it brings or for the danger that it comes with. Because that reminds one of the attitude of the person in Surah At-Tawbah who told Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, why does he not want to go to Tabuk? He said, Ya Rasulullah, these Roman women, they're so beautiful. I don't trust myself with them. I want to protect my iman and I want to stay here. Ala fil fitnati taqaf. Save me from fitna. Don't send me there. So we can have the same attitude when we know the risks of any types of growth, really, even that in knowledge. But that's not the attitude. That you've already fallen in fitna straight off the bat. The problem has already began. So knowledge comes, the prophets are the ones bringing the knowledge. Who's opposing the prophets? The scholars. Again, Isa alayhi salam. How did he end up with the death penalty? Whether that we believe that penalty was not executed, it was only made to appear so. Even if it was made to appear so. Who gave him that fatwa? How was he put on that cross? Scholars. The rabbis. They said, this guy's a magician. Magic is kufr. Kufr is apostasy. Apostasy is punishable by death. He should be punished by death. So a prophet of God was given a verdict by scholars of scripture for having violated the boundaries laid out by scripture. And we see the dangers of religiosity. It is not, again, the Quran started off with this. The third ruku, that Allah guides with it. يُضِلُّ يَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. He misguides with it. So the misguidance potential that is present within the Quran itself, we need to be wary of. مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. So nobody differed with it except those who already had something from before in knowledge. مِن بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَتْهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. After clear signs had reached them, بَغْيًا بَيْنَهُمْ. Out of a jealous animosity to one another. So the self had not increased in conduct, in goodness, in righteousness. It had only increased in arrogance and putting other people down, where knowledge was a means to personal to establishing one's own authority and dominance. فَهَدَى اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. But Allah guided those who believed لِمَا اخْتَلَفُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الْحَقِّ بِإِذْنِهِ. To the truth about which they differed by His permission. وَاللَّهُ يَهْدِي مَن يَشَاءُ إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. And Allah guides whomever He wills to the straight path. So there's three groups that you're seeing here in the very least. the prophets coming in, bringing the truth. The people of knowledge from before who are the greatest opponents to that truth. And then third is the general audience. And now they're utterly confused. And you would see this from people time and time again who would say, how are we supposed to judge? How are we supposed to know? There is so much dispute. There is so much division. There is so much difference of opinion. You don't have a consensus among yourself. We are the common folk. We are the lay people. None of this makes sense to us. And now within this third group, there are two possible responses. One possible response is, okay, it is still important enough for me to struggle to find out the truth, even if there is a legitimate difference of opinion or even an illegitimate difference of opinion. It is a confusing difference of opinion. That which was clear has been made crooked now. I will make that struggle. I will do whatever it takes to educate myself, to inform myself, to understand as best as possible. Again, in the Bani Israel, it was the prophets that they were disputing and disagreeing with. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Ulama'u ummati ka anbiya'i Bani Israel," that the ulama of my ummah are like the prophets of the Bani Israel. So you will have the ulama su, of course, the scholars of evil, but then there are scholars who are on the path of the prophets, who are akin to the prophets in stature even, according to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So there is that conflict. They are the mujaddideen that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said would come. They would revive the true spirit of the message. The true message would be revived by them. Now it's them standing against other scholars. Now for a lay person, whose side is the truth on? It is very convenient to say that this is too confusing. This is too perplexing for me. I am in so much doubt. I can't deal with this anymore. Go to hell, all of you, with your disputes and fights. As one of my teachers used to say, you would never do that for shoes. You go to a shoe store and you will find 100 different brands with 100 different designs. But you come back with a pair of shoes. You don't come back frustrated, oh man, there's so many brands here and they all look so good and so, I don't know which one to choose. I'm not going home with any shoes. Why do you give more priority to shoes than you do to matters of religion? That you would let this be without resolution, but as far as shoes were concerned, as much of a confusion paralysis you were in, or decision paralysis you were in, you chose a pair of shoes. And that's the prioritizing. Now this decision paralysis has a name. Agnosticism has a validation from philosophy. It's called postmodernism, where there is a belief that there is no such thing as a capital T truth. It's just every person's word is as good as anybody else's. You really can't know anything. So they've given this agnosticism a philosophical position and justified this as a destiny, as destination rather than understanding, and it's contrary to basic human conduct. When you're confused, when you're in doubt, there is a natural movement towards alleviating that doubt, figuring things out so you can find out what needs to be practically done. But when you make that a philosophical position, when laziness becomes a philosophical position, you don't do the work and you use fancy jargon to say, this is relativism. There is too much relativism, moral relativism or truth relativism or whatever. And therefore nothing can really be known. We should be respectful to everyone and everything. So that's between the third group. So let me clarify. I think I was vague or not clear enough. There's the ulama who are already there. There are the mujaddideen, or the scholars of truth, who revive the message from the Quran, from the Sunnah, reprioritize. These are the social problems. This is what we need to be doing. Their primary opposition is going to come from the scholarly circles before it comes from the general public. Right? Now there's the general public. Within the general public, we have a further division in categories. One that says I don't want to care. There's too much disagreement, too much confusion. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm going to go do my own thing. Another that says, no, I have to figure this out. And there's a struggle that they go in. Go for it. Please. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. So that hmm. So that may be an easy way out. That may be an easy way out to say, okay, I don't have time for this, but I'm not going to do away with taking a position. At least it's better in that sense where a position is being taken. But it is being taken on the authority of group A or group B. Someone's authority is submitted to. Rather than those who said, to hell with everybody, we don't care. Which in itself is a position, by the way. They're not saying they're taking a position, but they are taking that position that we're not going to take a position. That's a position. Anyways, so am hasibtum an tadkhulul jannah. Do you think you will just enter paradise? وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. While there have not come to you trials like the ones faced by those who have passed away before you. If you were to tie this with the previous ayah and the discussion that we're having, what pampered princesses do you think you are? That everyone in humanity had to struggle to find guidance. And you're complaining that it's too hard for you because you have to do it yourself? That you have to struggle a little, research a little? You have to explore a little, ask a few questions, learn a few things? Is that too much for you? Who do you think you are? Where is this entitlement coming from? You want God and the angel to just come before you and tell you what's right? And a lot of people in frustration would say that. Why don't I just get a sign? Well, there's so many signs already that have been revealed, 6,000 of them in the Quran, in fact. Oh, but all these scholars say so much different stuff about them. How am I supposed to know who to follow or what to believe in? You spoiled brat. Who the hell do you think you are? You want this pampered treatment. You want everything in a platter. Struggling is so difficult for you. You want change, you want goodness, but you don't want to make any effort for it. Your mommy should have stopped cooking your meals when you went to college. So you learned to get off your backside and do some work for yourself. Because you were spoon-fed for way too long. And these habits are not helping. وَلَمَّا يَأْتِكُمْ مَثَلُ الَّذِينَ خَلَوْا مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. Well, there have not come trials to you the way they came to those before you, those who have passed away before you. مَسَّتْهُمُ الْبَأْسَاءُ وَالضَّرَّاءُ وَالزُّلْزِلُ. Hunger, adversity confronted them. And they were so violently shaken. حَتَّى يَقُولَ الرَّسُولُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. To the point that even the messengers of the time and believers among them said, مَتَى نَصْرُ اللَّهِ. When is the help of Allah coming? That's how difficult it became for them. These are now the committed group, those who sided with the Prophet, those who believed in the truth that is endorsed by the Quran, by Allah. Yet they were subjected to so much torment, so much torture, so much difficulty that even their hope, there was a question mark that started appearing there. When is the help of Allah coming? Mata nasrullah. Ala inna nasrallahi qareeb. We're getting a principle here. A divine principle. One of the sunan of Allah. When does the help of Allah come? When the night is at its darkest. When there seems to be no way out. And if a believing community, when everything within them is pointing in a direction away from belief, yet they hold on to belief. And they remain steadfast. That's when the help of يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. So they ask you what they should spend. قُلْ مَا أَنْفَقْتُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ. Say whatever you spend from wealth, فَلِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ وَالْيَتَامَ وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. Give it to the parents, the relatives, to orphans, to the helpless, and to the traveler. Again, we see this question twice. They ask what to spend. The question is what to spend, and the answer is that is being given is where to spend. And when the answer is given as to how much to spend, that too is left vague. قُلِ الْعَفْوُ. That is going to come in later surah. They ask how much to spend. قُلِ الْعَفْوُ. Tell them whatever is in excess. Now go judge whatever is in excess. In other words, this habit of wanting to be spoon-fed. Tell me exactly what needs to be done. Allah refuses to do that. Because in indulging that attitude, giving exactly, concretely, on the 27th of Ramadan, 1445, at 4 o'clock, you need to say Alhamdulillah, or Astaghfirullah, or attend the class, or that doesn't happen. Because what that spoon feeding does is you don't grow up. The training wheels have to come off. You need to learn to ride this bike on your own. So for human beings to be empowered, to truly mature and grow, this spoon feeding needs to stop. So a sufficient amount is left vague for individual judgment. Resources have been left in order to make the best judgment. But you have to do the deed yourself. Come to those conclusions yourself. Exercise your own faculties. And that is what it means to be human. Exercising those faculties, taking those choices. So where do you, whatever you do spend, this is where you need to spend. Your parents, your relatives, your orphans, your helpless, and the travelers. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ بِهِ عَلِيمٌ. And whatever good you do, Allah knows it fully well. كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْقِتَالِ. Fighting is prescribed upon you. وَهُوَ كُرْهٌ لَكُمْ. Although it is disliked by you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُوا شَيْئًا. And it is quite possible that you dislike something. وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. But it is better for you. وَعَسَىٰ أَن تُحِبُّوا شَيْئًا. And it may well be that you like something. وَهُوَ شَرٌ لَكُمْ. While it is bad for you. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah knows and you do not know. So this religion of feeling, or a religion in which your feelings are God, you need to grow out of this. I will do what I feel like. I will do what feels right. To give your feeling that standard of truth, that my feeling is going to tell me what is true, excuse me, but you're not a prophet. And that level of protection, of intuition, of that intuitive faculty is only given to prophets. That is not given to non-prophets. As far as we're concerned, our feelings are susceptible to demonic influence. So you may like something which is completely bad for you. Why? Because you're not immune to demonic influences. Your shayateen are having a party inside of you. And you're judging your feelings by what your shaitan is making you feel. And this is especially true and important today, when feelings are given more limelight than they ever have been in the history of humanity. When you ask someone, why should you pray? It feels good. Why do you wear hijab? I feel like it. Why do you go to the masjid to pray? It feels better. It seems like the default response or the cop-out response to everything is now become feeling. And so if somebody feels like homosexuality, that feeling needs to be given a legitimacy, socially and legally. That's how dangerous this feeling legitimacy can be. I feel like killing someone. I feel like it. If your feeling has an epistemological validity. It is an epistemological standard. It is the standard of truth. Why not my feeling? Lo and behold, you have 1 billion prophets walking around. Everyone with their own moral authority. Everyone, it's utter chaos. My feeling opposes your feeling. What are we going to do? Fight for it. Its conflict is inevitable and everywhere. So to give feeling that standard, the flimsiest of foundations for truth that you can possibly imagine. Not to say that feelings are altogether disregarded. There is a significance that they do have as part of the journey, but as a part, not as an ultimate standard, not as the final say as to what is true and what is not. Allah knows and you do not know. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الشَّهْرِ الْحَرَامِ قِتَالٍ فِيهِ. They ask you concerning fighting during the sacred month. قُلْ قِتَالٌ فِيهِ كَبِيرٌ. Tell them fighting during it is a great sin. Again, the incident of Nakhla had taken place, and in this particular incident, like I said before, the Prophet ﷺ was targeting the caravans, the trade caravans of the Quraysh. So a small group of Sahaba was keeping an eye on one particular caravan of the Quraysh setting out, and it was in the valley of Nakhla. And in this, it just so happened, long story short, that even though it was within the sacred months of fighting, the days hadn't concluded, they weren't over, and one of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ ended up killing one of the kuffar, or two of the kuffar rather. One Qurayshi was killed. قُلْ كِتَالٌ فِيهِ كَبِيرٌ. Tell them fighting during it is a great sin. And the Quraysh started raising hue and cry. Look at these prophets, or look at this prophet and his followers. They claim to be true, and they claim to be representing God, and they claim to be all good, and they violated a sacred month. How could they ever do this? October 7th, basically. So that's all of what they're going on about. October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, October 7th. They're not thinking about what has happened in Makkah before. Yasir and Sumayya radiallahu ta'ala anhum are not being mentioned. What was done to Bilal is not being mentioned. What was done to Khabab is not being mentioned. What was done to all the companions, the social boycott not being mentioned. How they had to leave Makkah because it was impossible for them to live there, not once but twice, once to Abyssinia and then to Yathrib, is not being mentioned. That entire history of oppression, we can debate about it, but they're being very Pierce Morgan about this situation and being very particular as to where they begin the discourse from. So this violation of the sacred months, this is making the headline. This is what is coloring the image of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Allah agrees, fair enough. What happened? Big deal. Not a small deal, not an issue to be made small of, but do not forget the context. What is the context? وَصَدٌّ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Preventing people from following the path of Allah. وَكُفْرٌ بِهِ. And rejecting it. وَالْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ. Preventing people from Masjid al-Haram. Fair enough, you can say that believing in the Prophet and believing in the way of Allah, that's this Prophet, but preventing people from Masjid al-Haram, that's your own value. That's your own standard. You violated your own moral standard. What face do you now have to say morality this and morality that and good this and bad that? Who the hell are you to speak? وَإِخْرَاجُ أَهْلِهِ مِنْ. And driving out its inhabitants, أَكْبَرُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, is greater in the sight of Allah. وَالْفِتْنَةُ أَكْبَرُ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. And that fitna is worse than killing. So yes, that person has been killed. Unfortunate. But the fitna that these people are causing that led to that killing to begin with, let's focus there. Let's not allow them to drive the narrative and begin history on October the 7th. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ, and they will continue fighting against you حَتَّى يَرُدُّوكُمْ عَنْ دِينِكُمْ, until they succeed in turning you back from your religion in istata'u, if they can. وَمَنْ يَرْتَدِدْ مِنْكُمْ عَنْ دِينِهِ, and those of you who turn back from their religion فَيَمُتْ وَهُوَ كَافِرٌ, and die as disbelievers, فَأُولَٰئِكَ حَبِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ, such are the ones whose deeds have become worthless. All good that they did as Muslims, worthless. في الدنيا والآخرة, in the life of this world and in the hereafter. وَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ, and these are going to be the inmates of the hellfire. هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and they will live therein forever. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, definitely those who believe and those who migrate, leaving everything and struggle in the cause of Allah. أُولَٰئِكَ يَرْجُونَ رَحْمَةَ اللَّهِ, these are the ones who hope for Allah's mercy. وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ, and Allah is forgiving and merciful. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ, they ask you about wine and gambling. So with the previous ayats coming in, first, whatever the Sahaba had brought in terms of the booty, if you will, the war booty, whatever spoils they brought from that caravan after that Qurayshi got killed, Rasulullah wasn't taking it because he wasn't sure if it's okay to. But after these ayats, it was taken and it was distributed. It was understood to be justified. They ask you about wine and gambling. قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ, tell them there is a great sin in both of them. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, although with some benefits for the people. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا, but their sin is greater than their benefit. Again, beginning of Medina, absolute prohibitions of wine and gambling are not coming in. But the way is being paved for that. For an absolute prohibition, the level to which a lot of the Sahaba's iman was already. If there was an absolute prohibition at this time, stop drinking, you can rest assured that some of them would have died of withdrawals. Because long-term alcohol consumption results in that level of biological dependence that if abrupt cessation would have meant absolute, that's at a biological level. Even at a psychological level, the community has to be gradually prepared. And that's what's being done. The way is being paved for that prohibition that is going to come. With this acknowledgement that this prohibition is taking place, nevertheless, there is still some benefit that is being recognized. It's not absolutely bad, but because the bad outweighs the little good that is there, the little good that is being acknowledged and deserves to be acknowledged, there is no shame in doing that either. The overall bad results in ultimately the prohibition. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ, and they ask you what to spend in charity. قُلِ الْعَفْوَ, tell them the surplus, whatever is more. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ لَكُمُ الْآيَاتِ, this is how Allah makes His sign clear to you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ, so that you may reflect. Such a beautiful combination of what clarity that is brought by Allah does. Allah, they're asking how much should you spend. Allah is not saying how much you should spend. Allah is saying an excess, whatever is more. What kind of clarity is that? This is the kind of clarity that makes you think. So think, reflect, use your reflective capacity. فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ, in this life and in the hereafter. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْيَتَامَى, and they ask you regarding the orphans. قُلْ إِصْلَاحٌ لَهُمْ خَيْرٌ, tell them the improvement is for them the best. وَإِن تُخَالِطُوهُمْ, but if you mix your affairs with them, فَإِخْوَانُكُمْ, after all they are your brothers. Some of the Sahaba were being so scrupulous, they were so mindful that if they are in charge of certain orphans and therefore their wealth as well, then they would be very worried, what if accidentally our wealth gets mixed up? We're eating from the same pot, and from that is the wealth of the orphan. What if I end up taking a bite which is not technically mine? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reassures and says, don't go to that level. You don't have to be that extreme. Yes, you take good care of them and you make sure their wealth is theirs. But if it gets down to this level where it's absolutely impossible to differentiate, don't be so hard on yourself. This is not a neurotic religion where you beat yourself up over impracticality. فَإِخْوَانُكُمُ اللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ الْمُفْسِدَ مِنَ الْمُصْلِحِ, Allah knows the corrupt from the reformer. Allah knows the one who wants to devour the wealth of the orphan. It's not you. It's not the kind of person who's going to come up with this question. Can we eat together from the same pot or whatever? وَلَوْ شَاءَ اللَّهُ لَأَعْنَتَكُمْ. If Allah wanted, He could put you in difficulty regarding this matter. He could have said, be very mindful. Don't you dare, not even a single penny that slips from their pile to your pile. No. Allah is not going to do that. Inna Allah azizun hakim. Without a doubt, Allah is mighty and wise. وَلَا تَنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكَاتِ. Do not marry mushrik women حَتَّى يُؤْمِنَّ until they believe. وَلَأَمَةٌ مُؤْمِنَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكَةٍ. A believing slave woman is better than a mushrik free woman. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَتْكُمْ. Even though she might impress you. وَلَا تَنْكِحُ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Likewise, do not let your women get married to mushrik men حَتَّى يُؤْمِنُوا until they believe. وَالْعَبْدُ مُؤْمِنٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن مُشْرِكٍ. Because a Muslim slave is better than a free mushrik. وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكُمْ. Even though he may impress you. أُولَٰئِكَ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى النَّارِ. Because these habits that come from being people of shirk, it is a natural invitation to the hellfire. If there is that level of intimacy as there has to be in a marital relationship, it is only a matter of time before your Islam, your Tawheed, it gets corrupted as well. Wallahu yad'u ila al-jannah wal-maghfirati bi-idhnih. Whereas Allah invites you towards paradise and forgiveness by His permission. وَيُبَيِّنُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. And He makes His ayats clear to people so that they can receive admonition. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. They ask you about menses. قُلْ هُوَ أَذٍ. Tell them it is a discomfort. فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. So keep away from them, from your wives, i.e. abstain from sexual intercourse during their menstrual periods. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ. And do not approach them until they are clean. فَإِذَا تَطَهَّرْنَ. But when they achieve cleanliness, فَأْتُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ أَمَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ. You can approach them the way Allah has prescribed for you. Again, there is no particular ayah that you will find in the Quran that tells you how Allah has prescribed for you to approach women. So what is being highlighted over here is biology. That what Allah has prescribed for you is biologically apparent. Those are the ayats of Allah that are being spoken of. So go the natural route. But natural not as in natural blind nature, but nature as the sunan of Allah being enacted, being represented, being experienced by human beings in the biological world, also in the physical world and what have you. Inna Allah yuhibbu at-tawwabin. Definitely Allah loves those who are constantly repentant. Wa yuhibbul mutatahhirin. And He loves those who purify themselves. The physical act of purification from that difficulty or discomfort, and taking from there how the spiritual purification, that this too works cyclically, that you as a human being need to be continuously returning to Allah, just like you have to be continuously cleaning yourself off from physical impurities. Nisa'ukum harthul lakum. Your wives are a fertile place of cultivation for you. Again, this is addressing a particular monastic tendency that wants to label everything sexual as anti-religious, as anti-spiritual, and therefore advises or preaches a complete asceticism from anything to do with this. So in that context, the legality or the permissibility, even the desirability of these relationships are being highlighted. The objectification that is typically alluded to, oh, this is the objectification of women and they're being compared to place of cultivation as i.e. land, it's completely missing the context. It is completely missing the background. And the metaphor that is being used is a metaphor that is in line with whatever is prevalent to the primary addressees of the Quran. It is in no way intending to denigrate the status of women whatsoever. If you want to read that into it, knock yourselves out. But that is not what is intended. That is not what is apparent to the people of the language. فَأْتُوا حَرْثَكُمْ أَنَّا شِئْتُمْ. So you visit this harth, this place of cultivation, as you wish. Again, do not consider piety or religiosity to be such that it asks you to abstain from this whatsoever. وَقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُمْ. And do send forward for yourselves. Invest in your future. In other words, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ, and have the taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّكُمْ مُلَاقُوهُ, and know that you will meet Him. وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and give good news to the believers. وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا اللَّهَ عُرْضَةً لِأَيْمَانِكُمْ. Do not make Allah as an excuse in your oaths. أَن تَبَرُّوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَتُصْلِحُوا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ, lest you should abstain from virtue, warding against evil and reconciling between people. If there is some social good, do not make religion as an excuse, or your oaths with Allah an excuse that hold you back from doing islah between people wherever possible. Wallahu sami'un alim. Allah is hearing and knowing. La yu'akhidhukum Allahu bil-laghwi fi aymanikum. Allah will not hold you accountable for what is unintentional in your oath. Even if you have sworn by Allah out of emotion, for whatever reason, that should not hold you back from doing good. Again, Allah is at-Tawwab. And you holding back, using Allah or your oath that you took in the name of Allah as an excuse, is you not recognizing those attributes of Allah, you projecting a certain rigidity which is alien to Islam, which is alien to Ar-Rahman. Wallahu ghafurun halim. Allah is forgiving. لا يؤاخذكم الله باللغو في أيمانكم ولكن يؤاخذكم بما كسبت قلوبكم. But He will hold you responsible for what you earn of deeds with what you intend in your heart. So intention and deeds coming together. Wallahu ghafurun halim. Allah is forgiving and forbearing. لِلَّذِينَ يُؤْلُونَ مِن نِسَائِهِم. For those of you who take an oath to abstain from their wives, تَرَبُّصُ أَرْبَعَةِ أَشْهُرٍ. There is a limit to wait for 4 months. It cannot go beyond that. فَإِن فَآوُوا. But if they reconcile, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. For sure Allah is forgiving and merciful. وَإِن عَزَمُوا الطَّلَاقَ. But if they decide to divorce, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Then Allah is definitely hearing and knowing. وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. And divorced women must keep themselves waiting for 3 menstrual periods. وَلَا يَحِلُّ لَهُنَّ. It is not permissible for them أَن يَكْتُمْنَ مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ فِي أَرْحَامِهِنَّ. That they hide what Allah has created in their wombs. إِن كُنَّ يُؤْمِنَّ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. If they really believe in Allah and the last day. وَبُعُولَتُهُنَّ أَحَقُّ بِرَدِّهِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ. Their husbands have a greater right to take them back within that period. إِن أَرَادُوا إِصْلَاحًا. If they want reconciliation. وَلَهُنَّ مِثْلُ الَّذِي عَلَيْهِنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And women have privileges just like they have responsibilities according to what is reasonable. وَلِلرِّجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً. But men have a degree of status above them, a degree of responsibility over them. Wallahu azizun hakim. And Allah is mighty and wise. الطلاق مرتان. The revocable divorce is twice. Third time is the irrevocable divorce. The revocable divorce is twice. فَإِمْسَاكٌ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ تَصْرِيحٌ بِإِحْسَانٍ. Then keep her in an acceptable way, or let her go with good treatment. وَلَا يَحِلُّ لَكُمْ. And it is not lawful for you أَن تَأْخُذُوا مِمَّا آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ شَيْئًا. That you take back from them anything of what you had given them. إِلَّا أَن يَخَافَا. Except when both parties fear أَلَّا يُقِيمَا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ. That they may not be able to keep within limits of Allah. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا يُقِيمَا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ. So if you fear that both will not be able to keep the limits of Allah, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا. Then as a result of mutual agreement, there is no blame on either of the two, فِي مَفْتَدَتْ بِهِ. On account of what she compensates the husband to retain the divorce. تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ. These are the limits set by Allah. فَلَا تَعْتَدُوهَا. Do not cross them. وَمَنْ يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ. And those who do cross the limits set by Allah, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Such are the unjust ones. فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ مِن بَعْدٍ. But if he divorces her, finally, for the 3rd time, it will not be lawful for him to remarry her after that, حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرَهُ. Until she gets married to someone else. فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا. But if he also divorces her, فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا أَن يَتَرَاجَعَا. Then there is no blame on either of them that they reunite. إِن ظَنَّا أَن يُقِيمَا حُدُودَ اللَّهِ, provided they think they can maintain the limits of Allah. وَتِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ, these are the limits of Allah. يُبَيِّنُهَا لِقَوْمِ يَعْلَمُونَ, which He makes clear for those who know. وَإِذَا طَلَّقْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, and when you have divorced women once or twice, فَبَلَغْنَا أَجَلَهُنَّ, and they have reached the end of their waiting period, فَأَمْسِكُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ أَوْ سَرِّحُوهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ, then either take them back in a reasonable way or set them free in a reasonable way. The whole idea being this entire process of divorce, as complicated as it is, because emotions get involved, you take decisions in your state of emotions that you might regret later on, it is supposed to be such that the ways back are kept open. Divorce once, wait for the waiting period, within that you can get back, after that you can get back, divorce twice, again within that, after that. It's only when it happens a third time that, and the waiting period is over, that it is irrevocable. Even then there is a possibility that is kept if there is another marriage that takes place and the woman gets divorced and then the first husband takes back. The idea being these are not games, these are not to be taken lightly, these matters are taken so seriously, contrary to a Christian tradition that had completely, on one end of the spectrum, marriage was not an ideal in the society, it was a compulsion, it's something that has to be done, it is a human weakness that has to be somehow satisfied. Otherwise the ideal is to be a monk or a nun or what have you. And even there, to get a divorce, to part ways, even in the most ultimate toxic situation, was next to impossible. You had to have an allegation of infidelity to justify parting of ways. Otherwise, you're stuck together with each other for life, right? So that detail that we see over here is paving the way for an attitude that corrects, that rectifies a very impractical way of being, a very unjust way of being. That not only is the institution of marriage respected, not only is it honored, it's sacred, nevertheless not to the extent that it becomes a prison for one or both. And in order for it to be respected and not become too toxic, there are these affairs details regarding divorce that have to be understood. And if there cannot be a good marriage, there can at least be a good divorce. That is a thing. And that is something that needs to be revived, especially in the day and age that we're living in, where again, the situation has become, if you're parting ways, you have to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, on the other spouse, make sure their reputation and everything they stand for is completely tarnished, and that is the only justification that you can possibly have for parting ways. That is an attitude that is anti-Quranic. That is not in sync with what the Quran wants of a reasonable human society that opens the way for a lot of exploitation, a lot of psychological and even physical torture that needs to be done away with. وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ, whoever does that, فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ, he certainly has been unjust to himself. So somebody who chooses to retain does not want a divorce, but this is being done, why? For retaliation. Let me teach you a lesson. That is explicitly warned against. The one doing that is not just being unjust to their partner, they're being unjust to themselves. He is unjust to himself. وَلَا تَتَّخِذُوا آيَاتِ اللَّهِ هُزُوًا, do not take Allah's ayat as a joke. Again, the state of affairs, the pathetic state of affairs in our society, where these ayats have no significance in affairs of divorce when they take place, and that is tantamount to making a mockery. making fun of them, not falling back on them, not paying heed to them, not thinking that they apply to our particular situation, which is so extreme that it justifies all the slander and all the public dirty linen or whatever that is being flung. وَاذْكُرُوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ عَلَيْكُمْ. Keep in mind Allah's favor upon you. وَمَا أَنزَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَالْحِكْمَةِ يَعِظُكُمْ بِهِ. And all of what He has sent down to you in form of commands and wisdom, He exhorts you thereby. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ. And observe the taqwa of Allah. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ عَلِيمٌ. And know that Allah knows everything. وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا أَنِ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. If there's any questions or comments, please do feel free. Realizing more and more that you are an incredibly patient group of people. So one way of looking at it is that even if dunya came first, it is more in line with a natural instinct. That a person who is realistically making the dua has probably not matured to the point of prioritizing akhirah above all else. Not the majority of us are not Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Right? For us, our immediate surroundings do get more of a priority, naturally so. And that capacity is regarded in the Quran. That capacity is understood, empathized with. It is not something that is disregarded or even criticized, because that's how Allah created us. It is a matter of working towards that level. Because what we're pitching it against is an attitude that excludes akhirah altogether. So at least start prioritizing akhirah. When it takes a greater priority, that will be in later stages of spiritual religious development. Also within the dua, the extra emphasis that there is fil akhirati hasana, but also waqina azab an-nar is added on. Save us from the hellfire, so as to emphasize that, you know what, this is a bigger deal. Please. For sure. So Ibrahim alayhi salam is recognized in the Quran as someone who got hasanah in this dunya. That does not mean that he did not struggle. His life was a life characterized by sacrifice. So part of the hasanah in this dunya includes deen, includes value, includes character, includes all of that which characterizes Ibrahim alayhi salam really. So to have that recognition as well. Barakallahu feekum. All good? Alright. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.